Hey everybody, this is Will, and in this video we're going to take a look at formatting stems and multitracks purchased from praise charts in Ableton Live. Now, I think this is super important because if we're going to run stems and multitracks using Ableton Live on stage, then we need to do it in a way that we can have freedom and flexibility and do it in a way that's stable and in a way that's efficient. We don't need to spend hours on a Saturday building a set preparing for a Sunday worship service. And the way we could do that is by using and applying the three-part framework for using tracks. Number one, we need to have a template for live performance. And number two, we need to take that template and format every single one of our songs exactly the same way. We're going to shift from managing stems, individual wave files, and move to managing sets that have our tempo saved, our MIDI mapping saved, our audio routing saved, and have our song section saved in that song. And if we do that right, then we can take those formatted songs, step 3, open our template again and build a set using our formatted content. So what we're talking about today is the second step of that process, formatting songs using our template. Now, if you want to use the template that I'm going to use for this entire video, completely free, you can download it for free by heading to fromstudiotostage.com/template, fromstudiotostage.com/template. The exact template I use today for this video, you can download for free. You could start formatting your songs using that template so that you can then eventually build your sets using that same template. Now, let's get started. So what I've done is I've downloaded a song from Praise Charts. This is Battle Belongs by Phil Wickham. Here's what you get when you download a multi-track file from Praise Charts. You get a zipped file. So I'm going to double click to uncompress that file. And within that file, I get a bunch of stems. Now, remember what I said at the beginning. We're going to move and shift from managing stems to managing sets. The mistake I see a lot of people make is they download a file from Praise Charts like this. They go in and they grab all of their stems and they drag their stems from here into their Ableton Live Set every time they go to build a set. Now, maybe you're super well organized and you've managed files really well on your computer. So you've got a songs folder and you have all your stems for your songs. But when you go to build your set, it takes you 20 to 30 minutes because you got to bring your songs in. You got to add your locators. You got to add your tempo. It's just a bit of a bummer. You got to remap your MIDI controller, route your audio. We're going to solve all of that by using our template and taking our template to format these stems. So we're going to take these stems here and drag them into a new Ableton Live Set. But before we do that, there's two things we need to do to prep our live set to make sure we're ready to go. So I'm going to open Ableton Live, or I've got Ableton Live already open here. And I'm going to do Command, okay? And I'm going to go into the Preferences in Live. If you're on a PC, then do Control, and then go to the Record Warp Launch tab. Next, you want to go to the Warp Fade section, which is our second kind of section of content here. And the feature that's called Auto Warp Long Samples, we want to make sure that that is disabled, that it's turned off. In short, that basically means we want to tell Ableton Live, hey, listen, I appreciate the offer to guess at what the tempo of my song is, but I'm going to actually tell you what the tempo of my song is, okay? So that's essentially what we're saying. Hey, Ableton, don't worry about trying to figure it out. I'm going to tell you what the tempo is. This is a key thing if we want to use stems and multitracks in live and we want to warp them and not have issues. Turn off auto warp long samples. The other thing I want to mention, every time you're on a new computer, let's say you're using your drummer's computer, you typically build this in the studio, but you're using your drummer's computer for this particular set. Make sure you go into Preferences, Auto Warp Long Samples is turned off, okay? Next thing we want to do, we want to work pretty quickly in Live. So what I'm going to do is go over to Live's browser. I'm going to go down to the Add Folder section here. I'm going to go to Desktop, click into Praise Charts, and you'll see this is our file name, our file folder for this song. So I'm going to click on it and hit open. And now what you'll see is over in my browser, over on the left-hand side here, I have all of my stems. So I can access all my stems directly in Live as opposed to going to Finder and selecting them and dragging them into Live and going back and forth. Everything is in Live and is ready to go. Okay. Next thing we need to do, this is crucial. This is our third step before we bring anything into Live and really do much in Live, is we need to set our tempo for our song in Live. Now, if we look at our stems, thankfully Praise Charts includes that, both our key and our tempo in this, and they're telling us this is 81 BPM. So I'm going to go up to Live's global tempo here. It's set to 120 right now, and I'm going to type in 81 BPM and hit enter. Okay. Now, if you don't know your tempo, if you're not sure exactly what the tempo of your song is, use a metronome app on your phone just to open it up, just to tap away to figure that out. Or you could use Live's tap tempo feature. You'd have to know how to turn the metronome on and set your output and volume, which we're not going to talk about in this video, but you could say 1, 2, 3, 4. Live's click is going to start after that. Metronome will start after that. And that could be a way that you could figure out your tempo. We know our tempo though, because again, thankfully, Praise Charts gave it to us. And so we know it's 81 BPM. This is going to help a lot when we go to warp, because remember we turned off auto warp long samples. We need to tell Live, because we turned that feature off. We need to tell Live, hey, this is the tempo of our song. Okay. So by adding that there, 81 BPM, we know now know the tempo of our song. So let's press tab. We're going to go over to arrangement view, which is where we're going to be formatting our song, and where we're going to be running tracks from. So I'm going to reopen the browser here. We see all of our stems. So I'm going to click our topmost stem here. I'm going to hold shift and click the bottom stem. Now, before you drag anything in, watch what I'm doing. Okay. So well, don't pause because you'll miss it, but keep watching the video, but don't do it. If you're trying to follow along with me, just you pause what you're doing and watch what I'm doing and then get back to it. So I'm going to click and drag. I'm dragging all these stems at once, but I'm not going to let go yet. Okay. That's super important. I'm not going to let go. I'm going to hold command. You'll see each of these stems goes in its own track. I'm going to move over to the left here, and I'm going to drop each of these in its own track. Okay. Now to clean this up, I'm going to delete these audio tracks that are, at the top of my set here. So I'll select this one. I'm going to hold shift and select this one. I'm going to hit delete. And so what I'm left with is each one of the stems that was in that folder is now in my live set in a individual track. Now, one of the things I'm going to do just to clean this up, to make this look a little cleaner, is I want the track name to match the clip name, or better yet, because it actually does. Like you can see the name of this clip is actually the name of this track. It's a little easier to see in session view if you see that. But I don't want that full, I don't need all the junk in the name, if you will, right? I just need to see what that part is. So for me, I'm going to go here, acoustic guitar, and I'm going to rename this. So I'm going to click on this clip. I'm going to do Command R, which is my rename function. And we're going to type acoustic, which is the name of this part. Then I'm going to hit tab. That's super important. I'm not going to hit enter. I'm going to hit tab to automatically jump to the next part. We're going to type bass, tab again. We'll type claps, click, cues, drums, lead. We'll call this power, organ, pad. Another thing I should mention, I mean, you could rename these whatever you want to. You know, instead of pad, you could call it synth. Instead of synth, you could call it aux keys, whatever it is. But I'm going to rename this so that I know exactly what these tracks are and know exactly what they're doing. Okay. The next thing I'm going to do, let's close our browser here so we have just a little more screen real estate. I'm going to select our click and our cues tracks. So I'm clicking right here, right where it says click. I'm going to hold shift and select my cues track, and I'm going to drag this up to the top of my set. It's going to be super important for the thing we're about to do to make sure we have click at the top of our set. Now let's get to actually warping our stems. Let's make this process happen. Let's go through and warp our stems. And when we talk about warping stems, it sounds like maybe a little scary. Maybe you watched a video on the internet before where someone says, don't warp your stems because your audio quality is not going to be great, or don't warp your stems because it's just going to throw everything off of Live's grid and it's going to make it super difficult. I'll link to some videos in the description of this video, but warping our stems is super important when it comes to freedom and flexibility. Again, we want to make sure that our stems are all in sync with each other. We want to make sure they're in sync with Live's grid, so that if we go to repeat and we want to go jump around a song section, that that's going to happen in time, and that we're confident when we click on a locator, it's going to go to that locator. We just want everything in sync. We want to make sure it's in sync with Live's grid, and warping is the way we can do that. We also, again, when it comes to freedom and flexibility, we also get the freedom and flexibility to jump around in our set, to change our key, to change our tempo. And all of that happens because of warping. So here's how we're going to do this. I'm going to go to the bottom of my file here. I'm going to select this stem. I'm going to hold shift, scroll up to the top, and select my click. Okay. So what I basically am doing here is selecting all of my tracks, and I want to make sure that the click track clip, that's difficult to say that 5 times fast. Make sure that the click track clip is the last clip that I have selected. In this case, it is. Okay. So now with this selected, I'm going to keep holding shift. I'm going to double click on it. And what I did by double clicking is I opened up, you can see down here at the bottom, I opened up detail view. And if you did this right, you're going to see 13 clips, based on the song you're doing, yours maybe 21 clips, 20, whatever it is. But you'll see a number of clips here, and you'll see a message that says 13 audio clips and 13 tracks are selected. Okay. So now what I'm going to do, let's warp this. And again, warping is scary. You should be afraid of it. You shouldn't do it. That's at least what the bad man, the boogeyman on the internet said. But watch how difficult it is to warp. Okay, here we go. I'm in my file. I click warp. And what did I just do? I warped, right? That's how I warp my file. Now, the reason this is so simple is because we have a click track, and you can actually see how our click track, that's what we're viewing. Because our click was the very last clip that we selected, that's the thing, how we're basically able to warp this really quickly. We set our tempo to the actual tempo of the stems, which is super important. We have a click in our file, which is super important. And because of that, we basically enable warp. We go to our warp modes here, change from beats to complex. One final thing I do, you don't have to do this. This is just like I wouldn't even say a best practice. It's just something I've always done. So I'm going to continue to do that. I'm going to go to the end of the song here, and the last downbeat of one, I'm going to double click to create a warp marker. And essentially what I'm doing is I am pinning audio. Here's the start with a warp marker. Here's the end with a warp marker. So that it doesn't go beyond those bounds. It's going to stay the same key, the same tempo. It's a completely Will Doggett best practice. You don't have to do it, but I think having those warp markers in your file is super helpful to lock in the beginning and the end of your file. Now, looking at your click, most every song you're going to get is going to be the same tempo, right? It's going to be a consistent tempo throughout. And so you basically just really hit warp, hit complex. If you zoom in too far on this, you're going to kind of start to lose your mind. You'll see, oh, it's way off the grid. It's way out of time. Most of the time it's not. So I go to about this level. That's as far as I typically zoom in, and I just double check to make sure it looks like it's on the grid. What's nice about this though, is what you may end up seeing is you look at this and go, oh no, my click is actually falling out of time. Halfway through my song, my click shifts off the grid. That just means there's a tempo change in your song, and there's no reason to fear. There's nothing wrong with that. What that just means is you need to take your click and double click on each one of those and just kind of line those up to the grid. There's some extra stuff you do. I walked through that whole process. I'll include a link in the description of this video. I don't want to bore you with that in this particular tutorial, but I have an entire video where I talk about how to warp stems and multitracks that have tempo changes. It's way easier than you think. As long as you have that click, you're good to go, which is super great. So now let's set our tempo. We need to set our song tempo. You're going, Will, you're losing your mind. We set our song tempo up here. Yes, we did. There's actually 3 different ways to set your tempo in arrangement view. Let's talk about those really quickly. First one, Live's global tempo up here, like we talked about. That's going to set my tempo for the entire live set. But eventually, we're going to have multiple songs in a set. So how would we change our tempo, like based on the location of where we are in our set? So most of you, if you've been using Ableton Live for a while, probably set your tempo this way. If I enable automation mode here, I expand my master track, go to in my device chooser, select mixer, in my control chooser, select song tempo. And you probably go down, create a breakpoint, drag it up, drag it down based on what the tempo of your song is. I did that for years. That's how I set my tempo of my songs in arrangement view. There's nothing necessarily wrong with those ways, but there is a better, more optimized way to do that. We'll talk about that in a second. The reason we don't want to set using Live's global tempo or by creating automation in our master track is because those do not carry over with the song. They don't stay with the song. So if I take this live set and I go and drag it into another live set, as soon as I move it into that live set, the tempo is no longer there. So that's kind of a bummer because I talked about moving from managing stems to managing sets. And if we're going to manage a set, there's got to be some benefit to doing this extra work. Well, the benefit is we're going to use our third possible way to set our tempo in Live's arrangement view. And the way we do that is it's actually going to save with our file. So as we go to drag this file into another file, it's going to come with it. The way we do that is by using what I call a tempo track. And here's how I'm going to do that. I'm going to go to Live's browser here. I'm going to go to my templates folder. And I want to go to my free tracks template. So I'm going to close down these templates. We'll talk about those in a moment, but I'm going to go to my free tracks template. Again, if you want to get that template, if you want access to that, then you can head to fromstudiostage.com/template. Just throw in your name, your email, and you'll find it right there. And it's going to save you tons of time. So I would highly suggest you do that. In order to do this, I'm going to click the arrow to the left of my template. I'm going to click the arrow to the left of my live set. The live set is the file that ends with .als. Then we're going to jump down to our tempo here, okay? Our tempo track. I'm going to click on this. I'm going to drag this to the top of my set, okay? So there's my tempo track. Next, I'm going to click the arrow to the left of the tempo track, and we see this clip here, enter tempo and segment BPM. I'm going to click this and drag this in, okay? So you see that at the top of our set. I'm going to put my mouse to the right of this clip, and I'm going to drag it the entire length of my live set. Now I'm going to press minus to zoom out, and I want it to fill my entire set, or at least go to the end of my clips. And it's super important that wherever you have clips in a Ableton Live arrangement view set, that you make sure you have a tempo assigned to it. So for example, if I zoom in here, all my clips end at the end of measure 96. So I just want to drag to there. I want to make sure that is has a tempo assigned to it. Now, to actually assign our tempo, I've kind of like given it away here and what this clip is named. You see that it says enter tempo and segment BPM. If you don't see that, double click. That's going to open up detail view at the bottom of your screen here. And we want to go to what's called the segment BPM box, right? This is towards the bottom of this clip, and it says BPM. And what's the BPM, the tempo of our song? It's 81 BPM. We're going to enter that in and press return, okay? So by doing that, I'm basically saying the tempo of this clip is 81 BPM. And you might be going, but Will, how do you know the tempo of that clip is 81 BPM? Well, because I just said it was. And technically this clip is just a clip of silence. And we're just going to use that segment BPM feature. There's nothing recorded there. We're just going to use that segment BPM feature to type in our tempo. Now there's one final thing we have to do for this to work. We want to go up to this button here that says follow, and we're going to click it and change it to lead. And you'll notice two things happen when I did that. One, look at this automation line. See how it turned gray? It's actually fussing at me and saying, if you look at the bottom of the screen, it says tempo automation cannot be edited because one or more clips is set as tempo leader. If I go up here, Live's global tempo, that's grayed out. The reason that's grayed out is because the tempo for my live set is being defined by my tempo track, which I'm defining that right here with that BPM. Okay. And so the nice thing about this, the reason we took that third path, the third way here, is by using our tempo track, we're saving that tempo in our live set so that when we go to bring that into another live set, when we're building a final set of all of our songs, our tempo is going to come with it. So we do the work once, we never have to do it again. Now at this point, let's save our file. So I'm going to hit Command S to save it. And I want to throw this on my desktop. Okay. So I've got this praise charts folder here. I want to save this on my desktop. Make sure you don't save it. If you're on a Mac, go to, and this may be what it looks like for you. Go to the where section. So right now it's saying save this in praise charts. If you're in a live set, it's possible. Let's see if I can back out here and show you what you're probably going to see. You're probably going to see the last live set that you worked with, and you're going to be tempted just to save it and save it there. It's going to be really hard to manage stuff if you do that. So save this in a layer up, right? So that it creates a new live set, okay? New live project rather. So I'm going to the praise charts folder here, and I'm going to save this as Battle Belongs. And then I think this is just personal preference. I think it's super important that one, you land on a naming convention for all your files. It's going to be the same for every single file you create, whether it's an original song, whether it's a song you purchase from praise charts, it's got to look consistent. And I think in that file name, you need to have your key and your tempo. So I'm going to do Battle Belongs, D flat, 81 BPM. Do this in case I spell correctly, and we're going to hit save. So now what that's going to generate and create, let's go back to Finder here, and I'll show you in this folder, we now have a live project folder, and there's our live set that's a part of our project folder. Okay. Final thing I'm going to do, and I'm going to do this actually later at the end of my project just to make sure I don't miss anything. I'm going to go to File, Collect All and Save. And I'm just going to hit OK. I'm going to leave everything set as default. I'm going to hit OK. What that's going to do is that's going to go throughout my computer hard drives that I potentially have. And it's going to say, where has Will referenced or brought a file in that's stored somewhere other than the live project folder? It's going to go grab that and then bring that into that project folder. So what's cool about this, if you want to go share this live project folder now, You click on this project folder, and within it is a samples folder that has all those stems that we already brought in, and it's going to have our content that we bring in here in a moment as well, which is great. So now we've saved our file, we've warped our file, we've got our stems loaded in. It's important now that we add a few other things. So we've saved our tempo, but let's talk about adding our click into this, okay? So I have a click track here. So like if I solo this, let's listen to that just for a second. Okay, so that's the click that's included with my file. Now you may or may not enjoy the click sound that Praise Charts includes with the file. It really doesn't matter, because this next step is where we're going to define what's the click sound that we're using for our live project. Okay, so I'm going to go to my template, back up to my template here. I'm going to go to this click track. I'm going to drag this click track, say that 3 times fast, into my live set. Okay, and it's going to go to the top here. If you like the sound of the Praise Charts click, then just take your click track clip and just move that up there. Okay, so now if I solo that, you'll hear one, it's already automatically routed to the left-hand side. If you happen to have headphones on, you'll hear that. And that's because that click track track is already set to route. I'll show you here. It's already set to route here, audio 2, external out 1. So I've pre-done that routing, which is great. But for me, I don't like using the click track that's included with the file. I don't get rid of it because, again, I use it as that reference to warp things, particularly if my song has tempo changes. It's super important that I leave that click in the file. But I'm going to replace the click track sound that's included in my song. I'm going to go ahead and replace that with my own click track sound. And the reason I do that is I want every single song that I build, every single set that I build, to have a consistent click sound. So if I have 5 different songs and 2 of them are original songs and the other 3 are songs I purchased from Praise Charts, I want the same click sound for each of them. I don't want the click sound to change timbre. I don't want it to change tone. I don't want it to even change volume per song. Unless someone in their ears could turn that up or turn that down, but I want it consistent. Okay. To me, that's being a good musician. That's caring for your team well, being a good music director. So what I'm going to do for this is I'm going to go back to my free template. I'm going to click the arrow to the left of the click track, and you'll see we have this 4/4 clip here. We're in 4/4. So I'm going to click and drag this into my live set. Now this is going to be a pretty long file. So I'm going to shorten this up a little bit, drag it to where it ends there. But that's now my click. So now if I press play, you hear we have that sound. That's the new sound of our click, and it's playing automatically at 81 BPM because this clip is set to warp. And so it's warping. It's going to play at the right tempo. But what's nice is when I get to song 2 in my set, wherever that is, whether it's original song or a song I purchased from Praise Charts, that song is going to have that same click sound as well too. Okay. So that's super important to me. Have a consistent click sound across all of your tracks. That's one of the #1 mistakes I see people make when they're using tracks on stage, is a different click sound. Let me show you what I do. Okay. So I'm going to hit save on this, but I take this a step further. Now this is not included in the free click track file. You can purchase this individually if you want to. It's included in the advanced arrangement view template if you want, but I use something called Foundation. So if I click the arrow to the left of my arrangement view template here, go to my click track. Okay. Let's click and drag this into our live set. We'll move this to the top of our live set here. That's going to drop in. And then I'm going to expand, click the arrow to the left of the track here. I'm going to expand this to see all these different MIDI clips that I have loaded in. Now this is in 4/4. I have different clips or different time signatures. So if I did change time signature in this song, that's fine. I could grab another clip. But I'm going to do 4/4, and I'm just going to do quarters and eighths. So I don't need 16ths. So I'm going to drag this into my set. Similar to what we did before, right where our mouse is, I'm going to click and drag, press minus so that it keeps going. Okay. And this is a MIDI click. Now here's the reason that I use foundations. Okay. This is the big thing. If I press Shift Tab, I'll show you over here. Down at the bottom, the actual Foundations 3.0 instrument. What I can do with this, let's solo this so you can hear it. You've never heard so much click in your life before on a YouTube video, but I can increase this. You'll hear one, I turn the accent on. I can turn the accent off. I can increase the eighth notes if I want to. I can take them completely out if I want to. Let's say I've formatted this song, but I'm using it at a different campus that likes a different click sound. I just changed to a different click sound. I can increase my volume if I want to. And I have the flexibility to do all of that within my live session that, again, I've pre-programmed, done the work once. all of that is done for me. So that's a look at what I do. I use Foundation so I get individual control over subdivisions. I can change accent on and off, which you should always have your accent on. Don't be a weirdo. Have an accented click, and then you can change the click type without having to reformat your song. So that's just a personal preference. That's what I do. But let's stick to our free click that's included in our template. Again, I'll include the link to Foundations, our advanced arrangement view template, in the description of this video if you want to check it out. It's free for subscribers if you are from Studio Stage subscriber and sign up. But we've got our click in here. I'm going to, again, delete Foundations. I'm going to hit save so that we restart and do this from scratch. Now, the next thing we're going to do, it's going to take a little bit of work, but one of the best features of Ableton Live is the ability to do this, to have locators. And let's say we set up, I'm going to solo our click so I don't accidentally play this song. Let's say we're right here. I'd have to guess that this is the intro of our song. So I'm going to right click and add a locator, and we'll call this intro. And then I'm going to guess this is our verse. Okay, so we're going to add that locator. So I'm going to click on my intro, and I'm going to press play. Let's listen to that. Okay, so we're just listening to our click now, but there's our intro. We're about to go to our verse, but what if I want to repeat the intro? I'm going to wait till I get to this last measure, and I'm going to click on this locator, and we repeat our intro, right? We jump back to that. So if I have locators in my song file, I can jump around, I can repeat around in my song section. It's also nice because I can look at this, and right now, if you're just looking at this, it's like, where's the chorus of this song? I have no clue. But if I have locators included in here, I can see, oh, there's my intro, there's my verse, there's my chorus. I can double click on them to jump around. I get a lot of freedom and flexibility by having locators. But here's the bummer with this. Similar to our tempo, I can add these locators into my live file, but when I go to drag the live file that I have now into another live session to build a live set that has all of my songs, so we have great transitions and great flow between songs. When I go to do that, those locators don't come with it, right? So similar to my tempo, it would stink to go and take all the time to add locators for this song, because when I go to drag this live session into my live set, it's not going to come with it. But alas, no reason to fear, no reason to fret. I have a solution for that as well too. So let's go back to Live's browser here. We're going to go back to our free track template. This time we're going to go to our markers track. Now we're skipping over a few things, and that's fine, but we're going to go to our markers track, and I'm going to click and drag. I'm going to put that right below my tempo track. Now when this loads, if you look at it, you're going, well, this is an empty track. There's nothing included in here. Why in the world do we do this? Well, it's going to take a little bit of work, but this is going to save us so much time, and it's going to give us the ability to look at our song and know exactly where in our song we are, wherever we are. Okay. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to click the arrow to the left of our markers track here, the file name, so that we expand that file. We're going to go to the end of this track. So all the way to the end, we're going to click, and then, oh, we don't want to do that. We don't want to turn that off. I'm going to turn off automation mode because I keep doing that. Okay, there we go. Much better. Go to the end of my track. I'm going to drag all the way to the beginning here. I want to create a MIDI clip, which my keyboard shortcut for that is Command-Shift-M, and I created a MIDI clip. Okay. And now what I'm going to do, this is kind of a nice little hack, if you will, for when you're working with songs and praise charts. I'm going to solo my cues file here. If you're not familiar with cues file, we'll talk about this in depth a little more in here in just a second. But I'm going to solo this to listen to hear what each section of my song is. Let's press play. Let's listen just for a second here.
Intro, 2, 3, 4.
Okay, boom. We're into the intro. So now what I want to do is I'm going to delete these locators for just a moment because, again, they did not come with my file. So I'm going to listen to that.
Intro, 2,
3, 4. There's my intro. Okay, so I'm going to click right here. I want to split this clip. So the way I'm going to split the clip is do Command E. Okay, that's going to split it. And then I'm going to go to the right of this, and I want to do Command R to rename this, and we're going to call this intro. The reason I'm calling it intro is I believe this is David, but David or whoever recorded this in my ears is saying intro. That's the song section. So I'm going to name that intro. Now over to the left of here, I don't actually have a cue for that because it's the start of the song. So typically what I do is I click on this, do Command R, and I would do like count off or count in or whatever, or 2-measure count in, whatever you want to do to let you know that that's the start of the song, whatever works for you. So now let's jump to our next section. And this is how we're going to quickly figure this out. I'm going to click here.
Verse.
Okay. There's my verse. So I'm going to jump here and I'm going to split it and we'll do verse. Okay. Let's jump to our next one. Click here.
Verse, 2,
3, 4. And this is my verse. Okay, so let's split this, Command D. I don't need to rename it because it's the same section again. Now let's jump to this one.
Chorus.
There's our chorus. You can kind of start to get good at guessing. It's kind of in groups of 4, groups of 8, is whatever this is going to be.
2, 3,
4. Boom, there's our turn. Okay, we do have a time signature change. We'll talk about that in a moment. We'll call this turn. We'll talk about how to deal with our time signature changes in just a moment. I'm going to call this turn. One nice thing I want to point out here is if I don't want to call that turn and I want to call that turnaround, if I want to call that whatever, I could do that now in this section with this markers track. I can rename this maybe turn. Let's call this, turnaround. Real creative name, Will. Now I'm still going to have this guide cue, which we'll talk about how to change in just a moment. But I have this turnaround section here so that, again, name it whatever you want to. If you really wanted to get crazy, I mean, you could put the chords. I don't know what the chords for this are, but you could put the chords in this section. If you need that much of a reminder of what the chords are, you probably should just learn the song and memorize it, but that's my personal opinion. But you could add whatever info you wanted there. So now let's listen to our next section here. Again, we'll talk about our time signature changes and in just a moment before we wrap up this song. So let's press play here.
Verse.
There's our verse.
3, 4.
Boom, there's our verse. So we'll split it. We'll name this, oops, we do not want to do that. We want to click on the clip, do Command R and say verse. I'm going to jump through the rest of this. You can kind of just watch on, look over my shoulder as I do this. We'll do Command D. We'll do Command R. There's verse. Okay. This is, I bet,
Build.
chorus.
2, 3,
Build.
4.
Okay, so this is a good example. I don't need to know that there's a build because
Chorus.
like
2,
we're building at that
4.
point. But I do want the chorus here. So we'll do this, Command D. We'll rename this chorus. All right, let's see what this
Bridge.
is.
Bring it down. 3, 4.
All right, bridge, bring it down. Again, this will be good when we go to actually format our guide cues, because if I just leave this song the way it is, I personally would not put bridge, bring it down. I personally would not put build. So I'll show you, we have the flexibility to go in and change this and delete things. This is one of the reasons why I prefer still to use tracks in Ableton Live as opposed to Prime or Playback, because I get this level of customization. If those apps have that level of customization, they get way too complex for someone to use, right? The beauty of those apps is the simplicity. If you start to add the ability to do that sort of stuff, it's just going to lose its magic, right? The simplicity factor. But for me, I like being able to go in and say, you know what? I don't want the build. I don't want to call this a tag. I want to call it a turnaround or whatever. And I can do that in Ableton really simply. And we'll do that in just a moment. I'm getting ahead of myself, but let's keep finishing
Bridge.
this marker
2,
section.
3, 4.
Bridge right here. Okay. So I think, right?
Bridge.
Yeah. Another bridge.
Bridge.
Chorus. Oh, another bridge. Okay. Another thing I could do here, again, getting ahead of myself, I could cut these bridges and say, there's probably not 3 bridges. It's just a couple repeats or sections or whatever, combine them. Let's see what this guy is.
Build.
Yeah, I don't need build.
Vamp. 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, we'll do vamp. Okay. Oop, not camp. Oh my gosh. Vamp. There we go. All right, let's see what this is.
Chorus.
There's our chorus. That's what I was looking for. Now, Command R, chorus. So we're almost there. Again, the nice thing, this is taking a little bit, but I do it once and I'm done.
2, 3.
Tag, okay. So I'll split that. Tag, see what this is.
Outro. 2,
2,
3,
3,
4.
4. There's our outro. Split this. All right. And then let's see what we have here.
1, 2.
I guess
3,
that's our ending.
4.
Boom. And then we're out. Okay. And let's split that and we'll call this ending. Okay. So now we have our markers in this file. They're added in. I'm going to hit Command S again. So all of those are saved. Now I'm not going to add locators to this file necessarily. There is a scenario where you want to format every single one of your files, just the song file with locators. That's helpful if you ever think there's a chance you would be on stage and like need to double click and open that file and just press play. It's nice to have them there, but I'm not going to add them now because they're not going to come with me when I go to build my set. And the primary usage of this song is going to be in a set later. So I'm just going to add my markers because that's going to be the cue later for me when I go to actually build my set. That'll be the cue for me as to where to add locators in. Okay. So I've got my locators in there. We're good to go. We've got our click loaded in. Our markers track is ready to go. Let's talk about this cues track. Now I've mentioned a few different times that If you don't like a particular cue that's in a song, you have the ability to customize it, to change it. Here's what I would suggest you do though. Let's go back to our template. We're going to find our guide track here. We're going to drop this under tempo. It's important we keep the file structure the same for this. We'll talk more about that in a second. Let's say I like all the guide cues that were included in here. I like the song section names that they had. Then if that's the case, I'm just going to move this up and move this into that guide cue track. The reason I would do that to move it up is if I press play, let's jump to where we can hear a section here. I got it soloed. If we press play, it's automatically routed. Listen to the left, right? It's in just our left ear. It's in output 1 if we're thinking that way. So if you're going to use the built-in guide that's included with your file, then that's helpful. Just move it up and shift it up to the guide cue file. But again, pet peeve time. If I think of Ableton Live as an instrument, and if I'm a music director whose goal is to serve my team well, then I want to make sure my guide cues are consistent between songs. And if you've got an original song that you're doing and you've got a song from Praise Charts that you're doing, I guess it's possible that you could go grab the Praise Charts file and use that for your original song as well too. There's nothing wrong with that. But I want to make sure regardless, whatever song I've got, wherever it came from, that it has the same consistent guide cue sound throughout the entirety of the song, okay? The other thing is, again, I want the choice to decide, I don't want to call this a turn, I want to call it a turnaround. I don't want to call this a vamp. I want to call it a jam or whatever. So here's what I'm going to do. First, I'm going to move this guide cue file, the original guide cue file, back to that track. We're going to keep it around, although we're not going to use it. I'm going to go back to Live's browser here. I'm going to go to the guide cue track. Again, this is included in the free tracks template. And you'll see what I get in this section is all of my guide cue sections. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to leave both the original cues track as well as my guide cue track selected. I'm going to hold Command to select both of those at the same time. Okay, and let's listen to this first section.
Intro.
Actually, I'm stupid. I don't need to listen to it because I've got it written right here. So what I'm going to do is go to my intro section. We're going to drag this in. Okay. And now if you want to hear this, let's leave just our guide selected. Okay. So here's what my guide cue sounds like.
Intro.
Okay. It's already routed to the left. If I want to add the counts in like we did there, I can then add that right in. 2, 3, and then 4. Again, if I want to, so then I have
Intro. 2, 3, 4.
And let's solo our click so that you can hear that this is in time.
Intro. 2, 3, 4.
Okay, so that's great. If I want the counts, I've got them. If I don't want the counts, I don't need them. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to add a few of these. I'm not going to go throughout the entire thing, but I could add verse in here. There's another verse. So let's add that other verse into this. Let's go to chorus. I want to show you one particular section that I had kind of called out earlier. This right here, this turnaround section. Okay.
Turn. 2, 3, 4.
Right. Now let's say that, I want to call that, oh gosh, let's say I want to call that, well, we said turnaround. So let's say turnaround. So in the guide cue there, it said turn. I want to actually say turnaround. So I'm going to add this in. That matches my marker that I added here. There's verse, right? Let me show you a better example of something, a couple of different things we could do here. So let's listen to this. I think this was the one that says building. Build, right. Now, I don't want to say build, so I'm not going to add a guide cue here, which means build goes away. No one's ever going to know that there was a guide cue there that says build because I'm not going to add it back in. That's, again, a benefit of using Ableton Live. I can really be a music director and really care for my team by customizing this to suit their needs, right, which is great. Now, there's chorus, so we could add that in. I'll show you an example. This is maybe a better example. If I wanted, instead of calling this turn, let's call it instrumental. Okay, that's like a phrase I was looking for. I was trying to find a phrase that would work better. Instead of turn, if I want to call it instrumental, guess what I do? I just add instrumental in, and eventually I'm going to mute this original cues track so no one's ever going to hear it. And whatever guide cues I have loaded in are defined by what I've added in there, right? So whatever people want and whatever you want to call it, you can do that by using those included guide cues. Again, all that's included in the template from studiostage.com/template. All that's included in the template so that if you want those guide cues, you can have them, which is great. So now we're getting close to the end here. We're almost done. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close up this guide cue track, but I want to leave my browser open. And I want to compare what I see with file structure for this template to what I actually have in my song file. Okay, so we have click over here. Okay, we have tempo over here. We have guide over here. Markers, we have markers over here. And then we're missing one. Okay, so it's super important here that the file structure for our template matches the same exact file structure for our song file. Okay, and this has nothing to do with the amount of stems we have, because we'll talk about that in a moment. But I need to make sure my file structure matches. Now let's talk about this last track. So in my template, I have an original track file. In my song right now, I don't have an original track file. Now the way I use original track is, if you have an original MP3 or a reference MP3, or maybe a recording of this song that maybe you did for a rehearsal, it's from a sound check or something, and it's a recording of your team playing this song, it might be useful to include that, particularly if you're doing some automation, programming lyrics in ProPresenter or whatever. It's going to be super helpful to have that original track to reference. Okay. So I would include it. I don't always have it, but here's the thing. If you're going to ever have it in any of your songs, then you need to have the track, not necessarily a actual original track, but you need to have this in every single one of your Ableton Live files. Because again, the key to building our set really efficiently and quickly is that every single song is formatted the same. So even though I don't have a original track for this song file, I'm going to go and drag this in, put it right, oops, let's move this up, put it right below markers. I'm not going to add anything to it. And the reason I'm not going to add anything to it is I don't have anything for this song, but I know I've got at least 2 or 3 songs that do have original tracks. So I want to make sure when I go to build my set, again, all this is formatted the same, formatted properly, and I can build my set really quickly. So now with that loaded in, I'm going to hit Command S to save that. Okay. So again, I'm not going to use a original song for this, but I at least have it loaded in and ready to go, so that when I go, again, when I do get to one of those songs that has the original track, this song is going to go right alongside of it and just fit in there really, really well. Okay. Now, the next thing we want to do, again, you heard me earlier mention, it doesn't matter how many stems are in my song. As long as these top, what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tracks are the same, I'm good. Okay. So for the rest of these stems, here's what I'm going to do. One, I'm going to go ahead and mute my click. I've got my cues track muted because I'm using the guide cue file that I included. I'm going to leave it just because, again, I never delete stems. I leave all my stems in here because I want to format this once. Even if you, for example, even if you know, and you're going, I never will use acoustic will, leave it in there. Just mute it, right? If you think you'll never use it, just mute it, but don't delete it, because if you ever need it, you're going to have to, I think I rhymed there. That was kind of cool. You're going to have to go find it, drag it in, reformat stuff. The goal for us here is to do the work once and never have to touch it again. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to select my click track. Okay. I'm going to scroll down. I'm going to hold shift and click this last track here. Then I'm going to do Command G, which is going to group all of these. Then I'm going to click on that group. I'm going to do Command R, and I'm going to type in my name here. Battle Belongs. Here's another chance to use whatever naming convention you want, but I'm going to do key. So there's D flat and then tempo 81 BPM. You could add whatever info you want there. If it's a different arrangement, different artist, shorter key, if it's a key that a girl would lead versus a guy would lead, you could add all that info in the track, whatever you want to. Could be super, super helpful there in that section. But what I do with this group track now is I can fold this up. Let's hit save, and look how clean that file looks. One of my pet peeves a lot of times when I'm working with people using Ableton Live and building songs in Ableton Live is I look at their song file and I just go, how do you know what anything is? How do you know what a song section is? How do you know where the bridge is? There's the bridge. How do you know where the verse is? There's a verse. They have, 25 tracks, and they only have like 18 of them full of tracks because they're using tracks to be their source of outputs. I won't show you an example of that, but it's just a mess. But what I love about this particular set is it's really easy for me to follow. It's really easy for me to see, and it's pretty clean, and it's only going to get cleaner as I go. When I go to build my set, there'll actually be another level of cleanliness that we add to this, which is really great. Now let's dig into this group stem though, because again, earlier, so I'm going to unfold this. Earlier I talked about acoustic. What if I don't need acoustic? Then I'm going to go to acoustic and I'm going to mute it. I'm not going to delete it because I want it there as a reference for a rehearsal. I want it there as a reference in case our acoustic player doesn't show up that particular Sunday, and we can just take that particular stem and plug that into a direct box directly if we want. So I'm going to mute that. I'm going to mute claps because we don't want that. Actually, let's leave claps unmuted. Let's mute bass because I have a bass player. I typically always have a lead player, like rhythm guitar, electric player. Organ we don't have, so I actually want to leave that. I'm going to put the pad in, but I'm going to mute the piano because we have a piano player and she's going to play that part for us. So now I'm going to hit save. And what I'm saving is I'm saving the state of those stems either being on or off. Now, when it comes to drums, actually, I should mention we have drums. So let's mute that. Let's go to organ. Now, organ's a little hot in the mix for me, so I'm just going to bring this down. Okay. Maybe I want a little extra pad, so I'm going to then boost that up. Okay. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through this song. I'm going to adjust my levels of my individual parts to where I want them. I would encourage you press play, listen through the song, get kind of a general sense, and think about this as the fifth Beatle. Think of this as being a part of your band. How does this blend into your band? Does your band typically leave a lot of spaces? Then maybe boost the pad to fill that out a little bit. And we'll talk about a way to send separate outputs that will help with that as well too. But adjust your volumes and mute things that you're not using. Again, we're muting by pressing our track activator button to mute that. Okay, we're almost done. We're almost there. The next thing I want to talk about is Midi routing. I have 0 Midi routing on this file, right? So if I hit Command M, there's no Midi mappings that I've done. And the reason I've done no Midi mappings is because all of that is handled at my template level. So again, I've linked to the template video below. But basically what I did is in my template, I set up my Midi controller once. I plugged it into my template. I mapped stuff. And so when I build my set and press play, it's going to play. It's going to work. Okay. So my Midi mapping stuff is all handled at my template level. Let's talk about audio routing because this is a really cool, unique thing that I do. So in my template, I have 4 return tracks, and this is just my free tracks template. That's the number I chose. I've got 4 return tracks. Return tracks do not equal outputs. We'll kind of talk about that in a moment. I don't want to go too deep into it because I do have some other tutorials that I've linked in the description of this that dive deeper. But here's what we're going to do. I need to add the same amount of return tracks as what's in my template. I know I have 4 in my template. So one, just to make this easy, I'm going to go to this return track and delete it, go to this one and delete it to get rid of that reverb and delay. Now I'm going to go up to the create menu. I'm going to insert return track and I'm going to do this 4 times. Again, the reason I'm doing this is I have 4 return tracks in my template and I need the same amount of return tracks to be in my song file as are in my template. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and I'm going to start thinking about, in a typical scenario, how would I route my parts, my individual stems? How would I group them? Not necessarily route. Let's think about how would I group them. So probably my guitars would be together. My percussion stuff would be together. Pad would be together. You can have up to 12 return tracks. So you can have up to 12 groupings of sounds. Okay. Which is great. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to arbitrarily pick some groupings for sounds. Okay. So I'm going to say guitars. I'm going to go and choose all my guitars. So here's acoustic. I'm going to click Command. And let's find our other guitars. I'm going to skip bass guitar. I'm going to leave it by itself. Let's go to our other guitars. So lead, I'm still holding Command as I select these, and then power. So there's like my rhythm. I'm going to go to the send knob here. And if you don't see the send knob, click the S, okay, in session view. Click this S to see your sends. And I'm going to turn send A up. So essentially by turning send A up, what that means is I'm making a grouping of all my guitars are going to be grouped to this track. Okay. Next, let's see, let's take all our drum stuff and let's map all our drum stuff together. So we're going to do claps. We'll hold Command. There's drums. I think that's it, right? That's all our drum stuff. So I can see. Okay. So let's send that to B. So we'll turn that B up. Next, let's do key stuff. So we'll do organ, pad, percussion. I knew I was missing one. I knew there was one more. So let's bring B up, okay, for drum stuff. Now let's go back to our key stuff. Organ, pad, synth, piano. And note, some of these I've turned off. So for instance, piano, number 18 is turned off there. But the reason I'm still going to route it is in case I ever go to turn it on, I want it to go in that, stay in that particular grouping, okay? So let's go to piano. We're going to turn up C, okay? And so that turns up all our piano stuff to group it into C. Now I think we have one final track that's ungrouped. So I'm going to work my way back through here. Okay. I just passed it. Great. Yep. And as I expected, it's bass. So what I'm going to do is for my final track here, I'm going to turn up the bass. You should always turn up the bass. I mean, generally in my professional opinion, the bass should always be turned up. But I didn't turn up the bass. That was a terrible dad joke there. I sent the bass to return track D, which is, I'm going to group the bass there. And you may be going, well, it's one individual instrument. Why am I grouping it there? Well, I may have a synth bass in another song and I want synth bass to go to that output. I also start to think about groupings in kind of frequency range. So like low end stuff, like a bass guitar, I want to stay separate from like my pad stuff so that I could boost the low end stuff maybe on a low chorus. And I could boost the pad stuff maybe in a low chorus as well too, but keep the percussion stuff down, right? So those are my different groupings. Now you're looking at my return tracks here and you're going, well, all of these are routed to master. I am not going to deal with that or worry about that because all of my outputs, again, return tracks do not equal outputs. All my output routing is handled in my template. We'll talk about that when we talk about building our set. We're going to open our template and you'll see I've already routed those to outputs 1 through 8. The benefit of this though, is let's say instead of outputs 1 through 8, which is what I typically would have, there's stereo pairs, 4 stereo pairs. Instead of that, let's say I was just using outputs 1 for click and guide and output 2 for tracks, like the rest of my content. Well, in that case, I go to my return tracks. I don't do this at my song level. I'm jumping ahead. I apologize. I shouldn't do this. I would do this at the set level. But the reason we use return tracks is I could go audio 2, external out 2. And I don't have to go into this song to change anything. All my groupings are the same. I just changed my routing for that particular song. Okay. For now, we're going to leave it like this. Again, I shouldn't have said that because I'm probably confusing you, but let's just keep going on. Final thing we have to do as it pertains to audio routing. Let's group back up our track here. We need to go here to audio 2, and we're going to change this from audio 2 to sends only. And what that means is instead of my audio going to my master track like it did before, instead of it going to an external output, it's going to just go to the sends and returns. But here's the beauty of this. If the overall level of this song is too loud, guess what I do? Just bump it down. What I did by doing that is I brought the overall level of my song down, but I still have that separation into those groups that I did in return tracks. And then I could take those return tracks and send those to whatever outputs that I want. That's the power of using return tracks. And then again, at the set level, I could go in and say, let's take these instead of master. We're going to send them to output 2. Our click and guide are already routed to 1. Or let's say we're going through and again, we want to do 8 outputs. Then we do external out 1 through 8 there. And all of that is going to be mapped. Again, we're doing that at our set level in our template. Now, final thing we do before we move on, I'm going to hit save again. Just for good measure, I'm going to go back up to file, to collect on save. This is just a habit. At the end of working on any file, I always do collect on save to make sure anything I added from the beginning gets added in there. If I happen to forget to do collect on save in the beginning, then that gets added in there as well too. So here's what we end up with. We get a fully formatted file that has our click with it, a consistent click again across all of our songs. It has the tempo of the song saved in it so that if I drag from this song file into another song file, which we will, in a future video where we actually build a set, then my tempo is going to come with it. I have my own specific guide cue file, which is important because if I want to customize guide, if I want something that matches my team, one, we're going to have a consistent sound, and I'm going to have guide cues that match the song section names that we currently use. Next, I have my markers track. And again, markers track means that as I drag this file into my new file, I'm going to get some information on what each of my song sections are. So there's my chorus, there's my bridge, right? All that's loaded together. Original track, we're not actually using that for this particular song, but I'm going to use that for a song in the future. So I have the original track loaded in. And then we have battle belongs here. That's all my stems grouped up. And again, we're handling audio routing for those by using our sends and sending those individual tracks to our return tracks, which will then be sent to outputs. Now, one final thing I want to talk about in this song, as I mentioned earlier, before we wrap up, we're basically done here, but let's look at one particular thing in this song, and it happens right around here. So let's zoom in at our markers. Let's look at our click. This will actually be a little easier to see. So if we zoom in here and you look at this, and so it says instrumental turn, but then this turn right here actually happens on beat 3. So you see how we start that. It says instrumental turn 1, 2. Actually, let's see the original guide because that'll be a little easier to see. Click and guide. So see how it says here, and we can actually listen to this. It'll say, oh, let's turn this back on. There we go. Oh, and we got this going to a return track, which Where do we have that going? Let's just skip this for now. I'll send this to master so you can hear this. Okay, so let's listen to this.
3, 4.
Oh, I missed the beginning. What was it?
Turn.
Turn.
2, 3.
Okay, so it's counting 1, 2, 3, 4, but then it lands on beat 3, which doesn't seem right. At this point, because we're not using Live's metronome, you could skip this and you could just let it run and it would be fine. But the problem is the click that we added in, let's solo this. I want you to hear this click, okay? The click we added in has an accent. 2, 3, 4, okay? And a new measure starts here. So our accent is actually off, which we don't want. So two things I would suggest in your song file, even though this isn't going to come with it, which is a bit of a bummer, you could right click and do insert time signature change. Actually do this back here. We're going to insert time signature change. We're going to do 2, 4. Okay. And we get a measure 2, 4, and then that gets us back to 4, 4. Okay. Now for my click to be on beat, because I'm using an audio click, I'm going to go back into my template and I'm going to take this click and I'm going to re-drag it in so that it's going to start over right there. So I get 1, 2, but then it starts over a new measure. So I'm going to drag it here. Okay. So here's what it sounds like just listening to our click. Let's actually hear our click in the original cues file, just because that has the count in it as well too.
Turn. 2,
2,
3, 4.
okay. And then we start our click back over because we added our time signature change. Our grid is matching up with our stems. Now that happens again at the end of our course, if I remember correctly, I believe going into our bridge. There we go. Okay. So let's add our measure of 2 here-ish.
Bridge.
1,
Bring
2.
it down.
Okay. So we're going to do time signature change 2, 4. And then as we get into our bridge, actually, I guess we can switch it back here, right?
Bridge. Bring
2,
it down. 3.
1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So let's take that back to 4, 4. All right. Oh, nope, I did that wrong. Let's just nudge it over. Boom.
Bridge. Bring it down. 3, 4.
1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So our grid is correct, but our click is wrong. So let's take our click again. Let's drag this right here. So now it's going to start over. 1,
Bridge. Bring
2,
it down. 3, 4.
2, 2, 3, 4. Great. Now let's go to the end. Let's make sure everything's still in sync. 4, 4, 4, 4. I think we have maybe our tag. Yep. So there's one more. So there's a measure 2 here. Insert time signature change 2/4. And then on our outro, we start 4, 4 again. Okay. To me, the reason I'm doing this is it's super important to me that Live's grid matches up with our stems. Now, because I added this click back in, again, you see we got a super long click section here at the end. So I'm going to zoom out and I'm just going to tidy that up. Let's make sure our click that we added ends with the click that's in the file. Because my click has the accent in it, it's super important that I get the downbeats correct, and adding the time signature changes into my file. Again, even though they're not going to come with my file, that's going to help clean up and keep everything on the grid. Now, when I use foundations, I get a visual indication that there's a time signature change. What you may want to do here is say like 2, 4, maybe make it a different color, just so that visually you see that there's a time signature change in your file. Looks like I messed this one up by whatever I did, that time signature change there. So let's just cheat. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. I'm going to cheat just a little bit here. Move this over and we'll call this 2, 4. Okay. And again, we'll make this red. So just do whatever you want to as a visual indication, because then when you go to build your set, you'll see, oh, I need to add that time signature change in there for that section once we get that into our full set. So if you're using a click that doesn't have an accent, you probably don't need to do that. Though I still think it's worth doing, because once I add it into my set with locators, I want those stems to be synced with Live's grid. So that's a look at formatting songs purchased from Praise Charts in Ableton Live. I hope this video makes sense to you. I know it's a pretty long one, but I wanted to walk through literally from the beginning to the end of how this song is formatted, so that you get a sense of what to do. Now, I've included videos on formatting content from multitracks from Loop Community, as well as a few other people in the link of this description of this video. So no matter where you've got your content from, you can watch a full walkthrough of how to format that content in Ableton Live so that we can then eventually use that on stage. Again, as a reminder, if you need a template to work with to format your songs, save yourself time. Don't create it from scratch. Just go to fromstudiostage.com/template, completely free, and you can download that template. Thanks so much for watching this tutorial. We'll see you next week as we continue talking about how to use Ableton Live on stage in a worship setting for tracks. We release new content every single day, 10 a.m. Central, but we'll have a week from today, we'll have a new tutorial specifically on worship for you that you'll find. It goes live 10 a.m. Central. So hope to see you there for that one. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one. Take care, everybody. Bye.